Today I'm going to be talking about this core and expansion area. And I'm going to examine both these areas and what it pertains to the Rocky Mountain population in terms of conservation strategies. So the area I'm going to focus on is right here. And the red is the core, the green is the expansion. And these areas, the core and expansion, are purely administrative boundaries drawn by biologists who like to draw lines around things and put things into boxes so we can analyze them and do stuff like that. So, I mean, the birds are going to be moving eventually. The goal is to get them freely moving, but we've been focusing on the core and area. It's been on a lot of the management plans. And I figured it's time, in my mind, to start looking at these sub areas within the core and expansion areas and seeing how they've done over time. Once again, here's the core area, and in a little bit, I'll tell you about its importance. And at the time when this line was drawn, you're talking maybe 1980s. It was redefined in the last Pacific Flyway Management Plan for the Rocky Mountain population. And this is what is considered the expansion area. But once again, strictly administrative lines drawn by biologists to categorize things. So the Pacific Flyway Plan for the RMP basically has a management objective to get the birds out of the core area and into expansion areas and even beyond the expansion area, being mainly to maintain a healthy population. So the core area was important in the early stages of trumpeter swan management due to the protection afforded to the swans by all the federal and state lands. Here's Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge, where Banco was. We have Yellowstone National Park, and we have a lot of state land in here as well. So that is protected land, and that is actually very beneficial to any species and their management. Okay, now those areas assisted in increasing the number of swans in the RMP. And while the number of swans increased, the amount of habitat available to support them did not. And that's kind of obvious where federal land is set up. But as numbers increase, we're not going to have any more land available for them to go into. So it was important to get them into these expansion areas and beyond. Now, the expansion areas were identified and used to assist in redistributing swans and growing their numbers across the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. We didn't want to have any more catastrophic die-offs due to winter or things like that. So basically, we're not trying to put all our eggs in one nest, so to speak. Okay. Now, the core area is designated as the entire Island Park area, the Teton River drainage, Henry's and South Forks of the Snake River, Camas National Wildlife Refuge, Red Rocks, the Madison River, all these areas in here. And in perfect government lingo, the greater Yellowstone area refers to portions of the Montana, Idaho, Wyoming within the Pacific Flyway suitable for habitat, but outside of the core area. So that's how we define the expansion area, is anything that was not defined by the core area. Once again, with the methodology I collected all the aerial cruise survey and ground surveys used to count the swans. Data was collected by observers from airplanes as well as ground vehicles. And this is very similar to the last talk. Basically, one or two observers in the pilot count white birds and gray birds in known or suspected summer habitats. And once again, the caveat is counts are not adjusted for birds present, but not seen by aerial crews and have an unknown and unmeasured sampling variance associated with them. Okay. The analysis is, I took the total number of swans counted in cygnets from the fall report. In the back of the fall report, we have an appendix with all the various subcategories or sub areas, and the data was categorized as being either from a state's core area or an expansion area. Natural logarithms were calculated from the count data and were plotted over time for each state, and we use least squares regression. Okay. Now these are the various categories as they appear in the appendix that I felt were necessary for this analysis. This project is in its initial phase, and I'm just presenting phase one here. So in Montana, the core area consists of Red Rock Lakes, the Centennial Valley, and Madison Valley, and the expansion area is the Paradise Valley. And Paradise Valley was started, I believe, in 1990. That's correct, Susan. I mean, Susan's more of a historian than I am about this, but I think it was like in the early 90s that birds were going there. Okay, yeah, all right. And then in Idaho, this is the core area and the expansion area, Grays Lake, Bear Lake, Fort Hall Bottoms, Lower Snake River. And then in Wyoming, we have Yellowstone Park, the Upper Snake River Drainage, Grand Teton National Elk Refuge in Jackson area. And then these are the expansion areas trying to go, that's probably, that is all south of these areas in Wyoming. So this is the slide that I showed on Monday. Once again, we have the core area, and you can see that Wyoming really, Montana tends to drive the core area. But I was curious as to see what areas within the Montana area are actually contributing to this increasing trend over time with total swans. And for the expansion areas, it's Wyoming that is actually driving a lot of this. You can see there's been a downward trend for the past 6 years, but overall the trend line is still going up. And my data went back to 93, so for this analysis. And then we have the total number of cygnets. And once again, the core area produces more than the expansion area in cygnets, but the expansion area is actually catching up quite closely. So what I did least squares regression on each one of these areas. And the polygons, these are just a general area of the survey area. They're not exact. I didn't put them on GIS. I just kind of figured it out on a map. So this is the Paradise Valley, which is an expansion area. This is the Madison Valley. And here's Red Rock Lakes, and then the Centennial Valley to the west. But the polygon is green. It's had a positive increasing trend since 1993. If it's red, it's either decreasing or decreasing with a scientific significance to it. And if it's blue, it's been kind of holding steady since 1993. So you can see here for Montana, the two categories I used were total swans and the total number of cygnets observed from 1993. If it is bolded in black, it is a statistically significant increasing trend. And if it's just in italicized, it's just a upward trend with no statistical significance. And you can see that the Madison Valley has been in a negative, slightly negative decreasing trend since 1993. The Paradise Valley is an expansion area, you know, a slight increasing trend in total number of birds and kind of almost zero cygnet production. Whereas the Centennial Valley and Red Rock Lakes, once again, is the core area for Montana. And it pretty much shows since 1993, that's a statistically significant increasing trend at Red Rocks as well as the Centennial Valley. If we move on to Idaho, pretty much if you draw a line here, anything north of this is the core area. Everything south of this is the expansion area. And we have a mixture of stable areas, increasing trends, as well as significantly decreasing trends for the various areas. So up here by Island Park in the Shotgun Valley, it's been pretty stable. Nothing significantly increasing, but it is increasing slightly. Harriman State Park is very important. It's had a significantly increasing trend since 1993 of 3.8%. But if we get to the upper Henry's Fork and the lower Henry's Fork, they've had a statistically significant decreasing trend since 1993. And once again, here's the Camas area. It's kind of been holding steady since 93. Two areas here, the Teton Basin and Minidoka National Wildlife Refuge. Those are kind of like black and white circles. They've had very little swans occurring there since 1993. There's just not much activity going on. I think in the Teton Basin, they've had 2 years ago and 3 years ago, they had 7 swans each, but that was it. Other than that, there's really been no swans observed in those areas. And there's Grays Lake, kind of holding steady, a slight trend increasing, but that's about it. And then we have Soda Springs and the Fort Hall Bottoms area, just going down all the time. And then the Bear Lake area, which is a very nice green. for a very nice, significant increasing trend. So this is kind of like a spatial representation of what's going on with the RMP since 93. And if we look at Wyoming, there's Yellowstone National Park. Total number of birds is like -1%, but the cygnet production has been about 2.3% positive since 1993. That's why I gave it a blue. This is, I find very interesting is, you have Yellowstone kind of holding steady. South of Yellowstone, you have decreasing trends. In the Bridger Teton, the Upper Snake, and the Grand Teton, pretty much have all had negative trends since 1993. But then just south of that, you have Elk Refuge with a positive trend in cygnet production, but not in total number of birds. And then you have the Jackson area, which is a statistically significant increasing trend in both total birds as well as cygnets. And then pretty much everywhere south, the Upper Green, Big Sandy area, Green River, Fontenelle Reservoir right there, and Seetskiddy Refuge. Since 93, it's been a positive increasing trend. And lately it has gone down. Susan and I talked about this the other day, and since about 6 years ago, the numbers have started going down, but as of the 2022 survey, which just took place, the numbers have gone up a little bit. And then there's the Hams Fork area. Very little swan activity going on there, but it's still surveyed. So if we break this out into what the trends are actually doing, if we look at all the, whoops, there we go. The core area has about 25% increasing trends. 31% of those areas have been stable. And in the core area, 30% has decreasing trends. And then there's that no data. Those are those black and white circles. And then if we look at the expansion area, in the expansion area, 50% of all those polygons are increasing. 16% are about stable, and similar with decreasing trends. So that's pretty good for the expansion area. They have increasing trends overall. Another way to look at it is 60% of all the increasing trends occur in the expansion areas, whereas 40% occur in the core area. And then stable areas, 71% of those are in the core area, whereas only 30% are in the expansion areas. This I find very interesting is that 75% of the decreasing areas occur in here in the core area, where swans were used as the baseline for trying to get the population to grow. And only 25% of the decreasing areas occur in the expansion areas. Basically what I'm doing is I'm trying to set this up now I'd like to apply what I've done in terms of the regression analysis to look at the changing landscape over the past 30 years. Those data sets are available, and I hope to contact a researcher with the Intermountain West joint venture, Patrick Donnelly. And this is a good representation where if it's a green swan, it's an increasing trend, blue is stable, red is decreasing, and black, there's little nor activity. So you have the core area right here from Red Rock Lakes to Yellowstone, and this is a combination of increasing or stable areas. But then you've got this area here, and then this big area right in through here has been decreasing trends. And it would be really good to tie this to landscape change to see what's going on, because I feel that is really the next step we need to go with looking at the RMP, is to see how the landscape has changed and tie it to these trend lines to figure out what's going on. And is it really worth putting more swans on the landscape? I think it's a good process, but I think we really need to start looking at, can the habitat start supporting this? Are there habitat covariates going on that can explain these decreasing trends in the middle of the core area? The expansion area is doing quite well. And, out to the southwest here, we've had decreasing trends. Those have been part of expansion areas, but the swans have just not taken over there. And it's, I'd like to figure out why. So that's kind of this first phase of what's going on. Like I said, I want to do more of this with landscape analysis, and then see what happens next, and really start figuring out what's going on here with the RMP. One of the restoration areas is way up here in the northwest by Dale Becker's area, the Confederated Salish Kootenai tribe. Those swans have now been added, like I said, to the fall survey. And it's those swans that keep us in the objective for the RMP plan. Those birds have done a very good job of bumping us into that objective of 718 adult birds that we need to have the plan's objective met. And it's nice to have those birds there because they're the ones that pushed us into that compliance with the objective of the plan. And to get this area a little bit more stable would be very nice, and particularly figure out what's going on with the habitat. So that's all I've got.